Hello, my quilting friends. My name is Leah Day, and welcome to episode 68 of the podcast. And today I'm going to share a quilt story about Shadow Self. This is a goddess quilt I created in 2010, and it has a very special representation. It is all about challenging your inner negative voice. And I'm going to go into what that means, but basically this quilt, making this quilt, was a really important step on my journey to healing a lot of past hurts and overcoming a lot of negativity and things that were holding me back. And it really is one of those things I come back to time and time again with these goddess quilt stories. Making a quilt can change your life. And I do think that packing symbolism into your quilt is a really, really good thing. I mean, it can be as simple as simply deciding that a pinwheel block means something special to you. And every time that you use it, you're getting that affirmation or that memory or whatever you've decided that means. And I think that you can take anything. You can take a traditional quilt block and you can decide that it has a special meaning and fill your quilts up with more than just fabric scraps and triangles and squares. You can put more into it. And I think a lot of quilters already do this. Last week we were talking about quilting for show. And one of the things that I am always I just always find it funny in quilt show entry forms, they always say something like, write a brief description of your quilt or write a brief explanation of the inspiration for this quilt. And then they always include a caveat of, do not quote from lengthy prose, do not write basically a book-long wall of text. And that's the thing. I think there's a lot of quilters that want to share more, that want to tell more of the story. And thankfully, we have programs like Alliance for American Quilts that, that basically their goal is to go and collect these quilt stories and to document the stories behind the quilts. But even still, it's one of those things to think about. If you have never written down any information about your quilts for your family, that might be something you want to do. Maybe just keep it in a little journal somewhere. That might be something to pass down to your daughter, your granddaughter, your sons, your grandsons, to keep that in the family. And it might be something that you could even keep adding to. Just an idea. I've been thinking about that. This has just been on my mind, kind of the heirloom quality of quilting, the way that we pass things down from one generation to another. And it's just something I'm kind of riffing on. So, just kind of all of that and more in this episode. Now, I always begin with a little updates about what's going on around the house and some of the behind the scenes and what I'm really working on. And please know that you can also see a video of what I'm really working on during the podcast. You can find the video for this podcast at leahday.com/shadowself. You can also see images of the quilt and some close-ups, so come and check that out. So this week I am still working on my freeform crochet sweater. And losing a little steam on this because I'm just not spending as much time crocheting as I was before. Main reason that I got into this project is I was using it. It was very, very helpful. I could crochet and listen to the book, Mally the Maker, that I was editing. And I could, be crocheting and keeping my hands busy, but easily stop, put it down if I needed to make an edit in the book. Well, the book is that editing process is more or less done, and I've been instead spending that time working on the illustrations, and those are, as of today, completely finished. I am so, so happy that these are finished and done. I have decided to add one more thing, and that is a map. I know it's one of those things, it's like, give a mouse a cookie. I keep thinking, okay, this is it, I'm done. And then, I need a map. It would be so nice to have a map to know where you are in the book, So I am gonna draw and illustrate a map that should be fairly quick. And the main reason for wanting to add the map is I was at Books A Million last week, dropped James off at a birthday party. I went to Books A Million, and they had all these different kiosks. If you've ever been to a Books A Million, really the books have taken second stage to the toys and the games and all the extra stuff, not just books. And they had all of these different kiosks set up. Like they had a Hunger Games kiosk, and they had a Twilight kiosk, and they had a Harry Potter kiosk. And in the, I kind of, looked around all of them. I was just kind of intrigued just to see what kind of merchandise they were offering. And in the Harry Potter kiosk, they had a scarf with kind of a map of Hogwarts printed on it. I don't think that had ever been included in one of the books, but then again, I always listened to the Harry Potter books. I did not actually own the books. So I just thought that was interesting, and of course, as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh yeah, I need to do a map for Mally the Maker, and then I could print that on fabric too, And it's just all the different possibilities. It's just fun more than anything else. But I do have a deadline for myself to get the block of the book done, edited, all of these illustrations in place, and to be uploading to Ingram Spark and CreateSpace by August 15th. So it's August 1st. I have 15 days to get all of my ducks in a row and all of this done. And Mally the Maker has been such an amazing process of writing, and I'm just so excited about it. It's a story of a little girl, and it's a fantasy quilt novel. And yeah, very first book that like this I've ever written. I'm very good at teaching you how to quilt. So this has been really interesting and so much fun. And I gotta say, writing a story about quilting where I can invent anything just by describing it is so much fun, because I'm not limited by, oh my gosh, I have to teach curved seam piecing, and oh my gosh, I've got to, teach how to make flying geese, and oh my gosh, I got to teach how to do half square triangles, there's no limits. I can make quilts, that's the land inside the quilt, anything I want. And then I have to worry about, if I want to make a pattern of that, if I want to make a doll of that, if I want to make a, a pot holder of that, I have to worry about all of that stuff later. And that's the thing that I really enjoy about book writing, is that anything can be created with just a simple description. Just throw it in there and just see what happens. And that's been wonderful. And I am really looking forward to, I have already been outlining and thinking about book 2. And I know that outline is going to get majorly started in September. And then that book, I don't care where book 1 is, book 2 is starting, as far as I'm concerned, on October 1st. And I can't wait. I'm really excited about it. I mean, I can't wait to get back to writing. I feel kind of like I've cut off an arm or something. Like, it's just such a it became such a normal part of my daily process to wake up first thing in the morning and sit down. I had mostly wrote on my little iPad mini, and I would stand at the bar. My legs would get tired, and I'd sit down at the kitchen table, and I'd kind of like go back and forth between the two. And that was the start of every single morning for 6 to 8 months. And then now, when I haven't been writing, a lot of times I'll still write during that time. I'll write my blog posts, or I'll, write the podcast text, that kind of thing during that time. Instead, I think that my brain just works really, really well during that time. And that's the thing that I've learned more than anything else about writing and really focusing on building that skill, is that you've just got to find what works for you and take advantage of the time that your brain is most engaged. And speaking of morning routine, I've actually just incorporated a new exercise routine into my day that I'm really loving. So I really like to do yoga. I was getting to a class once a week, and that was working out pretty good. And then I kind of dropped out of that and wasn't going back. I need to get back to yoga class. But I really want to wake up in the morning and start my day with just a little bit of stretching. It just makes me feel better. It just makes my whole body feel better. And I already had an app for that, just a real basic yoga app. And then, it just started to catch up with me that I really don't exercise enough. 4th of July, we spent the whole day outside, and I was like hauling wood, and we were burning a bonfire and just doing so much physical stuff. And the next day, I woke up in intense pain because I just wasn't used to doing so much physical activity. I mean, my whole body hurt from top to bottom. And, that was kind of a wake-up call, like, wow, I am really letting these muscles atrophy. And if I'm not careful, I'm 34 years old, I might wake up and not be able to walk or, be able to pick stuff up and haul it around. I really like to be physical and be able to do the things that I want to do when I want to do them. If I want to go build a bonfire and haul wood around, out of the burn pile, then that's what I want to do. And I want to make sure that my body is still capable of doing that. So I really needed to get a solid workout routine. And I've been working out on and off since I started Whole30 in January, but really I don't know, I just couldn't get it into a habit that happened every single day. Well, I found a really good app for exercising daily, and they kind of make it a game, which I really, really like. And it's called 7, and just look up 7 exercise. That's the app, and basically it is 7-minute exercises. I know that doesn't sound like much, but they are intense and they get your heart rate going and, really get you that solid workout in 7 minutes. And I like the description of the workouts is usually something like, this workout has a range of intensity from 1 to 12, and this particular workout will fit around an 8, which will be uncomfortable, but it only lasts for 7 minutes. So I really like that. You can be uncomfortable for 7 minutes. I believe I can be uncomfortable for 7 minutes. And I really enjoyed that. When I started 11 days ago. I could do 5 push-ups. And I've just been doing the free app. I haven't paid for it. There's extra options and a lot more workouts if you pay for it. I'm just doing the free version and the full body workout every single day. And I was able to do 5 push-ups on my knees. When I started, I am now able to do 10 push-ups, regular good old style on my toes push-ups, and I can do 10 now. So that's the amount of improvement that I've had in just 11 days. So I highly recommend this little app. I highly recommend developing some sort of exercise routine because it really can creep up on you. I work on a computer every day. I'm trying to do more to get to standing desks and to use my treadmill. I basically kind of cobbled together a very cheap Walmart treadmill and kind of built a shelf over it to kind of sort of make a treadmill desk, which kind of sort of works, but kind of sort of not really. So I'm trying to work on that more. The problem is that it's a very outdated laptop that runs really slow and it's more frustrating to work on. But I'm trying to work on that laptop more for things like writing and answering comments and that kind of thing, just simply to be on my feet and moving and walking rather than sitting. And 2, using the long arm. I'm just really enjoying quilting standing up. Even when that ends up being, a couple hours of time, it just feels more physical. It feels really, really good. So yeah, every morning I've been getting up. I set my alarm for 6:15, and it is not any fun to wake up at 6:15 through the summertime, but I'm doing it anyway. And that is just the name of the game as far as I'm concerned. If I want to get these things that are important to me done, if I want to exercise every day, I've got to wake up early enough to be able to do it. So I wake up at 6:15. I kind of drag myself into the living room and unroll my yoga mat and lay down and do my morning stretches with the yoga app. And then by then I am pretty much awake and do the 7-minute exercise, the full body exercise with the 7 exercises. It's great. And my heart rate's going. And then unlike before where I would immediately go and make a cup of coffee, now I'm so pumped up and awake, I don't even need that first cup of coffee in the morning. And I usually wait on that cup of coffee until Josh gets up. So that feels really good too. That it's waking me up. I want water. I want some fruit. I want something like that. So it feels really like this is a great habit that I'm building here. And I'm really excited about it. That's why I wanted to share it with you. So that's a major thing I'm doing in the morning, and I'm also trying to work in more time on my home machines, doing some quilting on Dream Goddess. Now this is a quilt that has been in production, in quilting for years, and it's really one of those things like, it's a testament to how easily something can get stuck. And I realize now in retrospect that I left some question marks open, some design question marks open in Dream Goddess, and because of that, this quilt stayed unfinished. now for 3+ years. And I finally reached a point where I was like, no, this really does need to be finished, and I'm ready to finish it. I'm ready for it to be done. And knocked out. There was only 3 little sections left to do. It took 3 separate days to get the quilting done, and it's finished. Now, I still need to do the binding, and this is going to be a very different bind. I'm going to do essentially a kind of a turned edge where you take the edge of the quilt, you add a very long strip. You think binding, but it's actually going to be really, really wide. And you turn the whole edge of the quilt over to the back and hand stitch it down. And I might even actually go over that with some more machine quilting just to really stitch it down solidly. And it will be machine quilting kind of overlapping the quilting design I've already done. And I don't do this form of binding. It's more of an artistic binding to finish off that edge. You don't see the binding from the front. It's very much an art quilty kind of thing. And I don't do it very often. In fact, actually, I think I've only done this twice to finish off the Express Your Love Goddess quilts. And honestly, I can say this is probably part of the reason why I haven't finished this quilt. It's because I didn't want to mess with this binding method. I mean, this sounds silly, but this is the kind of thing that can keep you stuck. This is the kind of thing that can, take a project that's working and get it stuck in place. And in this case, it's been years. And, my word for the year is challenge, and I'm rising to this challenge and saying, no, I don't want this to stick around any longer. I'm tired of this quilt just constantly being in my way, folded up here, folded up there, shoved in the closet, setting in my chair. It's just always in my way in my room. And, and this room is kind of transforming because I have been sharing the room with a 55-gallon fish tank that Josh had since we lived in a tiny little apartment in Asheville. We moved with this fish tank, and now it is getting on upwards of 10 years old, and he was ready to dismantle it. So I'm suddenly getting a lot more room in this room, and it feels like Dream Goddess being done is also giving me a lot more space too. So all of this feels really, really good, and I just need to do the soak, prepare the binding. It's kind of like there's a lot more steps to this process, but start on number 1 and work the steps. A little kind of experiment that I'm doing, I picked up a deck of playing cards when I was at Books A Million, and I was really disappointed with them. They had all these pretty illustrations on the back, as if the entire deck was nicely illustrated. And then I opened it up and I realized there's only 4 illustrations actually only 3 for the Jack, King, Queen, there's 4, and the Jokers, and that's it. And so there's only the 4 illustrations, and they're repeated with each suit. I was so disappointed, but it gave me an idea. I said, I looked at the cards and was like, well, I can draw on that. So I have this deck of playing cards. So whenever I have just a moment, when I'm not crocheting, and I actually put a pen and the cards in my purse. So if I'm out and about and, waiting on food to come at dinner or whatever, I pull that out and start drawing. And what I'm going to do is use that as a way to experiment combining different quilting designs. So I already did one, and here you can see the card. And it's just fun. I've been looking for a solid way of experimenting with designs for a while, and it's one of those things like, how do you know what will look good next to something else? Well, you won't know until you actually draw it out or stitch it out. Stitching it out costs fabric and thread and a lot more time. It saves a lot of time just to draw it. And, playing around with these cards is a lot of fun too. And and while they're not perfect, I made a lot of mistakes, and my pen is a little bit smudgy and that kind of thing. It's still great practice, and practice is the key. It absolutely is. Practice is everything. And this is really coming, kind of full circle with my new calendar, 365 Quilting Designs. A lot of wanting to play and kind of go back to drawing and go back to, journaling and that kind of thing. Although these are cards, they're not really a journal. that's really, I think that a lot of seeing the designs in the calendar has really stimulated that, because it's just so much fun. This is a calendar that I came up with CNT, and it's basically every day you can flip over and see a new texture, a new quilting design, and just get that little bit of, yeah, a little bit of inspiration. And just seeing all of these all over again, it's just so nice. And it really reminded me, kind of taking me back to the designs and like, okay, we have all of these beautiful designs. Now, how do we use them? How do we play with them? Where will they look best? All of those questions. And yeah, just drawing on these cards is, for me at least, answering those questions a little bit. And when I make a mistake, when something doesn't look all that good, I don't worry about it too much. It's kind of one of those things. If I make a mistake and something gets ugly or something gets ruined, I'll at least have answered one question, and that is, what doesn't work? And I'll still have learned something. So it's not about it being perfect. I mean, there's some designs, like even just this one, that I didn't ever particularly like. There was a whole slew of designs from the original 365 that I didn't like them when I first created them, and some of them have grown on me quite a bit. And even the mistake ones, the ones that I was like, it's not all that pretty, they still taught me something, right? Now we still have 365 calendars. You can come and check these out. They are awesome. They set up on your desk, and you can use them year after year. Just make sure to be, gentle, and don't let your grandkids rip off the pages. I know there's some calendars, that are tear off. Yeah, be careful about that. But yeah, you can come in and check these out at leahday.com/365calendar. So that has been a lot of fun. I've been reading a really good book that I would recommend, and it is The Obstacle is the Way. It's an excellent book. And it is all about, the challenges that we face on a daily basis. Kind of goes along with my word for the year, challenge. And that the best thing that you can possibly do is figure out a way around it, above it, or, through it, and rise to that challenge, deal with it, overcome it, and, ultimately succeed. The author of The Obstacle is the Way also wrote another great book, Ego is the Enemy, and I highly recommend both. I think that they're excellent and really terrific if you're looking to just kind of figure your stuff out just a little bit better and understand, how to work through a problem or work through something that feels insurmountable. Or you're just kind of, the word entitled is a bad word these days, but, I have seen it in the quilting industry where some people do seem a bit entitled, and, there's no guarantees in life. I've had struggles and had to figure out my way around them and how to succeed. There's no guarantee. Even if you design 365 quilting designs, you can still make, potential disaster decisions that can put your business on the brink of failure. It can happen to anybody. So I think both books are excellent, and it's a good reminder to always come back to that we don't know everything and that everyone deals with challenges on a daily basis. So definitely check out those books, and they're great audiobooks, by the way. They're really, really good to listen to while you're quilting. So that's pretty much it for the updates around the house. It's pretty much what I'm working on, trying to get the crochet in, but knocking out some quilting and also enjoying the process of drawing and designing and working on Mally the Maker. And one last thing, I did do my Quilty Box post for July, and you can find that. Basically, I took the quilt panel from Quilty Box and quilted it and then turned it into a zippered pouch. So make sure to check out that tutorial I posted on Monday. So that's it for the updates. Make sure to check out more podcasts at leahday.com/podcast. And now we're going to go straight into Shadow Self and about this quilt and the inspiration and then how it was constructed. So Shadow Self is a goddess quilt that I designed in 2010, and this was a point in time that, 2010, a lot happened. I made Shadow Self. I made My Cup Runneth Over. It was my first full year in business. Just a lot was going on. A lot was changing. That year, I wrote and self-published a book and a DVD at the same time. It was crazy busy. I am working on Shadow Self was kind of mixed in all of that. And I think a lot of the success of Shadow Self has to do with the way I was kind of bungling things with my other quilt, with My Cup Runneth Over. And I've already shared the quilt story on that. And you can learn more about that quilt at leahday.com/gratitude. So that quilt, I had rushed. I had rushed the design process. I'd been in a major hurry. I'd just been, speed, 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 quick, 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 and then gotten stuck in the quilting process, and then ended up not as happy with it as I could have been because of the rushing. So I wanted to not do that again. It's one thing to make a mistake. It's another thing to learn from the mistake and, attempt not to make the same mistake again. And I was determined to do a better job on the design process and to be more satisfied with the finished quilt as a result of that. And I kind of gave myself permission to take as long as I needed. And that was really, really helpful. I would say of all the quilts that I've made, of all the goddess quilts that I've made, this one and Dream Goddess, I took the most time on the quilting design, and I have been the most happy with both of them. Now, Dream Goddess, as I said in the intro, I left some question marks on that quilt, and because of it, it took a lot longer to finish. With Shadow Self, I did not leave myself any question marks, and I believe that quilting was knocked out in 2 months. And there's a lot of dense quilting in this quilt, so that's really speedy. That's really, really excellent speed for a quilt of this style. So let's start with the inspiration for Shadow Self. That's usually where I get started with these quilt stories. So around this time, I really wanted to start actively working on my inner negative voice. This is the voice that I became really aware of it in high school, and realized that I had this voice in my head that was telling me really, really horrible things. And my voice in particular would call me stupid, ugly, and unworthy. And kind of in a continual spirally cycle, on a daily basis. It's like, great job on that test, stupid. Anytime that I would make a mistake, anytime that I would get a less than perfect grade, this voice in my head would just berate me about it. Anytime that I wanted to dress up and do something fun, wear a dress, I never put on makeup because every time I did, the voice in my head would just berate me for it. And then it really kept me stuck on taking any action towards the life that I really wanted, having a business, having a family, all of that stuff. Because every time it was like hitting a wall of, how dare you? You're not worthy of that. You can't possibly deserve that. That's not for you. You're not good enough for that. It was basically what I would hear in my own mind. So I became aware of this in high school, but I didn't think I could do anything about it. And just kind of assumed that this was just my lot in life, and I was destined to kind of keep this thing in the back of my head that was trying to eat me on a daily basis. And it really kept me stuck. I can't emphasize that enough. Like, I stayed in bad relationships. I had really bad friendships with toxic girls, that were mean and belittling. And, in a lot of ways, I kept those relationships around because I didn't think I could do any better. And, when you're constantly telling yourself that you're stupid, ugly, and unworthy, you'll kind of take anyone that will take you, right? And it took a long time. And really the turning point for this was the birth of my son. So I gave birth to James, and the second that I touched his little body, I was transported to another place. It was a moment of utter stillness. And something about that, I don't know whether it was just, it was in the heat of the moment, in the middle of birth or whatever, but for that minute and a half of time, my mind went blank and I stopped thinking. And all of a sudden, that judgmental, horrible, berating voice in my head was gone. And that was amazing. That was a gift. And all of a sudden, it was like, oh, I didn't know I could do that. I didn't know I could turn it off. Huh. Yeah. And suddenly I realized this is not natural. This is not something that I was born with. This is something that I'm doing or I'm allowing to continue. One or the other. You can look at it either way. Either you're doing it to yourself, which is horrible, or you're allowing it to continue, which is also horrible. So that was when I really realized that something needed to change and that I had an active participation in my inner dialogue. I could affect that. I could do something about it. So 2010 was 3 years after James was born, and life and parenting and all that kind of stuff, things get in the way. But at this stage, I had the extra time, I had the extra ability, and I was like, I really want to focus in on this. I really want to dig deep into this, and I want to make a quilt on it. Maybe if I make a quilt on it, like making Release Your Light, I made a quilt asking the question, how do I run a business? How do I share my creativity with the world? In designing Shadow Self, I was asking, how do I fix this voice in my head? How do I overcome this? How do I beat this challenge? How do I become free of this monster in my mind? So that's the question that I was asking. And it's like magic when you're really setting an intention and seeking something with your whole heart and your mind. The right things will step into your path. They will come into your awareness. I truly believe that. And something that came into, I kind of popped into my lap was the right book. The book was I Know I'm in There Somewhere. And it's a book about uncovering yourself underneath, sometimes what's called masks of survival, who you had to become in order to survive a certain situation, whether it was your childhood, the family life that you were raised in, a situation. I know I put on a mask of survival just to survive living in a dormitory in college for a year. Sometimes you have to fake it till you make it. And this book was about, once you're free of that situation, how do you return to yourself and find yourself underneath all of those layers and bring your true self forward. And I love this book. I still highly recommend it. And within that book, there was a kind of a practice, and that was to make a list of all of your thoughts. And then the second step of the practice was to make a list, to go through that list and figure out who said it to you first. So that's when things really started to change, because I made that list and finally faced and wrote down all of the negative thoughts that I had been thinking on a daily basis. And it was really hard. It was really depressing, because honestly, I think a lot of this stuff is just, it's in the back of your head. You're not even acknowledging that it's going on. You're not even really hearing it. It's just chugging away and eating at you and eating at you. And actually really focusing on that and hearing it and writing it down, you're forced to see it. You're forced to acknowledge it. And then the next step is challenging it. But acknowledging it, and that challenging came in of writing down who said it first. Because these thoughts aren't ours. I don't know about you, but I don't think I was born judging myself this way. I don't think I was born thinking I was ugly. I don't think I was born thinking I was stupid. It's taken me years to get there, but I don't think any of that was innate. It was learned. And what's horrible is that most of the stuff that is learned from the people that are supposed to love us most. And sometimes it's just inadvertent comments. There might be someone in your life that just has a habit of saying the wrong thing. Recently, I was sitting with some women, and one of the women said that her daughter calls her granddaughter Little Chunky, and the grandmother would really like her to stop calling her granddaughter that. That she found it bad and not leading to anything good, and sometimes it's not meant bad, but it can be taken that way. And I do remember being told I was ugly. I remember feeling ugly. I cut all my hair off when I was 4 years old with a pair of scissors. And rather than leave it with like bangs sliced off and stuff, my head was shaved. And so for the earliest years of my life, I was confused as a boy. Oh, look at that cute little boy, and I can remember it bothering me in a big way. Same thing for feeling stupid. I was best friends with the smartest girl in school, and it is impossible not to compare yourself when, your best friend makes A+ every single time. And I was not a bad student. I just didn't care enough to make A+ all the time. I was happy with B's. I was spending too much time crocheting and sewing and cutting up bits of paper and all that other stuff. Studying for hours and hours and hours never held an appeal for me. And that's the thing. It's like, when I look back on it now with the advantage of time and perspective and better self-esteem, I'm able to see that I had qualities that were just as good as being an A+ student and just as good as being the prettiest girl in school with nice long hair all the way down to your butt, which I never had in my life. But it was very hard for me to see those qualities because I was constantly judging myself against unfair pinnacles of success, and, I can't go back and fix that. I can't go back and, yell at my childhood self, like, please stop judging yourself, you're good enough as you are. But in a way, you kind of can heal that inner child. And that was another step of that book. As I was working on Shadow Self, as I was kind of processing through all of this stuff and writing that list and writing the name of the person that said that next to it, it brought up a lot of memories, a lot of very painful memories, a lot of not fun stuff. And I suddenly kind of felt this presence of my little girl self. And that was another emphasis and focus in the book, was to really try and visualize yourself as a child and to try and figure out some way of comforting that child. So I spent a lot of time in 2010 rocking in my rocking chair. And when I would take a nap, I'd hug myself really, really tight. And it was like I was hugging that little girl. And this is the thing. I really believe that we are still carrying our former selves within our adult bodies. I am still that little 4-year-old who had her hair shaved, and felt like confused and felt ugly. And I'm still that little girl that was, 14 and constantly comparing herself to her super mega smart best friend. And that's the thing. We have to take the time to heal that child and try and bring them up. Maybe even kind of going back in time and being the parent that child really needed. That we can do that with our adult selves. Some of this might sound a little woo-woo, but it works. It's worth it at least to sit with the idea and think about it a little bit. So the process of designing Shadow Self really was fun because I had to put my Trapunto over in jail and set that quilt aside. I knew I did not want to make that same mistake again. I really wanted to take my time with this design. I wanted to get it all right. I wanted to answer all of the questions in the quilt before I took the first stitch. So I think that this took about 2 months to design, and I was working on it pretty much every day. So it's time consuming. It's a slow process. There's a lot of drawing on a piece of paper, then drawing another piece of paper with basically the same thing and a few modifications, then drawing it again. As new ideas would come, you just have to kind of keep following each iteration until you get exactly what you want. This was a process where I was still drawing on paper, but I was drawing small scale. So I drew the design like 8 inches square. And the design itself is a goddess, a very simplistic goddess. It's basically, very, very, very simple shape. A head, a body, arms. And she is split in half with a giant circle. It's a yin-yang symbol, basically. And the yin-yang, where the yin-yang kind of comes through, it's splitting her head and it's splitting her heart. And I really made sure I emphasized that, because that's exactly how I felt like this inner negative voice was doing to me. It was constantly breaking up my mind, and it was constantly breaking my heart. And so I really wanted that symbolism in there. The darker half of the yin-yang, I decided the best way to really emphasize the stuck, very entrenched nature of these thoughts that I was having was all designs with straight lines and sharp angles. So that was a lot of fun. In fact, actually, I really love designs that are very graphic in nature, that have, straight lines, sharp angles. There's checkerboard and square spiral and left turn, right turn, one of my favorite designs. They're my favorites. And they're not, in my mind, ostensibly negative, but they're a perfect kind of counterbalance to a lot of very flowy, fluid designs like flame shapes and interwoven lines and that kind of thing. So this quilt was the first time that I really allowed myself to geek out on symbolism and let my freak flag fly a little bit and kind of dig into that. And so I drew not just the piecing design, which is basically, it looks like it's all applique, but it's actually not. I constructed most of this quilt with freezer paper piecing. And that was really fun because, with applique, you're always going to get, those layers of fabric doubled over and then on top of the other layer of fabric. I didn't really want that with this. I really wanted it to be pieced. So with freezer paper applique, you make the templates in freezer paper really, really big and press them to the fabric and then turn the certain edges under, glue, a lot of glue, Elmer's glue goes into it, and then open up the seam, do lots of clipping, and you're able to sew along the folded edges of the folded under pieces, and then open up those seams, clip it, and get everything to lay down flat. It's a really, really fun process, and it was a challenge, but it was a fun challenge. And I don't make a lot of quilts like this anymore because I really need to take over the entire table downstairs in order to do it. And since Dad and I share that space, it's kind of hard to be like, hey, Dad, go away for a day or two. So yeah, that's, I don't really have the ability to construct quilts like this right now in this way, but it is one of my favorite ways to construct a quilt of this style. And once I got that together, it went together really, really fast. It was not a time-consuming process. It was basically just glue, press, glue, and piece, one piece at a time, but it really went together very quickly. Now, I should say, before I even took the first stitch or pulled out the freezer paper to turn even one edge under, I already knew what the quilting design was going to be too. This is what I'm talking about, answering every question within a design before you take the first stitch. The quilting design is a major component. If you listen to last week's podcast on quilting for show, the quilting design on a show quilt needs to be able to stand up on its own. And the trapunto, the elements that are puffy, need to really stand out almost as good as a whole cloth quilt. So the question for yourself is, could the quilting design all by itself be its own whole cloth quilt? And the cool thing is I actually shot a picture of Shadow Self while I was clipping away the trapunto, and here you can see it. And so all of the white, that's the extra layer of batting for Trapunto. And you can see there is a lot of puffy in this quilt, and it absolutely stands up on its own. And that was thrilling. It really was, to get that right balance finally. And I think that's our large reason why this quilt was so much quicker to quilt, because so much of it was the puffy motifs. There was very little filler design quilting in it. I mean, there was still, certainly a lot of time-consuming quilting to go into it, but not as much as there could have been if I hadn't done all of that Trapunto. So all around, if I am comparing the construction of all of my goddess quilts all combined, Shadow Self was one of the quickest and easiest and most effortless to construct because of all of that design time, because I basically not only gave myself permission to take my time, but kind of required it, because I'd just gotten off, a project that I'd put in jail and, put in time out because I just had basically kind of a failure experience. And that's the thing, sometimes it can get really easy to get frustrated and throw a quilt in the trash and just be done with it. I did end up finishing my Cup Runneth Over, and it's one of my favorite quilts. But I think the more important story is the fact that it taught me to slow down, and it forced me to recognize that the most important part of the process is the design process. You have to answer all of those questions. You have to get all of that solid before you start pulling fabrics, before you start stitching anything together. So ultimately, Shadow Self is one of my favorite quilts. And I should add, there's a little bit of a collaboration in this one. I was originally planning on this to be just as bright and orange, red, and it's basically the colors of my freeform crochet sweater here. I had been originally planning on it looking very, very similar to Release Your Light, and orange and red and gold, and maybe some silver mixed in and stuff like that. And Josh, he has a really good eye for color. And Josh likes these colors. He likes really muted tones. He likes grays and blues and greens. And he kind of said, you've already done the bright sunshine quilt. You've already been there. You've already done that with Release Your Light. Why don't we do something different? Can I help you pick the colors? So we went to Mary Jo's cloth store together, and yeah, Josh picked all the colors, and he's still really proud of that. When I had business cards made for him, I put Shadow Self on his business card, so he, whenever he's talking to somebody, he's like, yeah, I picked out those colors for Leah's quilt. So it's kind of a special thing. And when I look at this quilt, even now, what I love about it most is it doesn't make me think of my inner negative voice. It's not a negative quilt like that. Instead, it makes me ask a single simple question, and that is, what thoughts am I fostering? What am I allowing to run through my head? What am I encouraging to run through my head? Am I doing the right thing? Or should I be picking another path? It's that simple. It is a constant balance. A yin-yang symbol is the balance of light and dark. It is the balance of good and bad. I don't think anyone has a completely blank mind, that's free of everything. But instead of constantly focusing on the way things lack, how things are not going well, or could be better, and this was bad or that was bad, or man, that was a stupid mistake, or oh my gosh, your makeup looks terrible in that video. I mean, could harp on any number of things, and certainly the people around me too. I could find 1,000,001 things to criticize other people about in my life. And that's the thing. Whenever I look at Shadow Self, it forces me to tap into who I want to be, the mind that I want to have, and what I want to be expressing to the world. I want to pick the lighter side. I want to be expressing gratitude and love and compassion. I want to be building a peaceful, contented life. That is what I work towards every single day. And making this quilt was a big part of that process. So I really hope that you enjoyed learning more about Shadow Self and this quilt story. I really enjoy sharing all of the stories of these goddess quilts with you. You can find more of them at leahday.com/goddess. And of course, if you have any questions about anything that I mentioned in the podcast, you can definitely post in the show notes, leahday.com/shadowself, or in the comment section of the YouTube video. That's great too. I love to hear from you and know what you're working on, so definitely post in the comments and share with me as well. Find more podcast episodes at leahday.com/podcast. Until next time, let's go quilt.